Here's a quick preview of some of the output of today's video. Lots of time spent on the surface grinder, a little bit of time spent on the lathe. I hope you enjoy it.
Welcome back to the shop. My name's Jamie, and in part 2 of our Vise Restoration series, we're going to be working on the fixed jaw and the movable jaw from the vise. I've got the movable jaw here upside down. The bottom side of the vise here has got a fair bit of pitting, and as you saw on part 1, the base of the vise had a lot of pitting as well. So it can't be helped. We're going to take care of that so that we have two nice clean surfaces to run on one another. And then for the fixed jaw, I will have to take down about 25 thousandths off of the bottom of these so that it'll fit nice and flat in the base. The base took about 25 thousandths off in order to get through all of that rust and the pitting that had occurred. So let's get these fixed and movable jaws squared away. We'll get them back on the base and move this project right along. Thanks for watching.
On the back side of the movable jaw, there are a couple of casting. A portion of the casting goes, in this case, since it's upside down, it goes up. I want to be very careful not to drive the grinding wheel into those castings. So I'm doing this part by hand on the surface grinder. One of the great things about this surface grinder is it has full hydraulic mode where it moves left and right and front and back, but you can also quickly transfer it over to manual mode. This first pass, only taking about 1 thousandths off, and it actually cleans up pretty nice. We'll blast through here, going through the rest of that first pass. Again, being very careful not to hit those pieces there in the middle. I've got some scoring, but overall I was happy with those results. Not a lot of gouging and pitting like I saw in the top of this movable vise jaw. So here it is after 2 thousandths coming off, and I'm very happy with these results. Nice clean surfaces. This will go, we're going to leave it as is and move on to the next part of the project. For the fixed jaw, as I mentioned, these keyway sections would have to be brought down so that they don't rock inside the base. A pretty easy action here to bring these down. Here's a before picture of the fixed jaw before we bring it over to the surface grinder, and then, kind of saving you some of the tedious nature of the surface grinder. I did want to share this with you. This is on full hydraulics right now. I have the y-axis, turned up pretty high, and that creates this video game sort of image here. It reminds me of Pong. Or I like to think of this also as the DVD screensaver, if you know what I'm talking about, the way that the parts are bouncing back and forth. But I did that to experiment with the surface finish. That's going to be a key to this entire project. It's all about surface finish, and as I learn more, I learned a ton on this project. Here I have the fixed jaw and the movable jaw up here together so that I can keep the widths exactly the same. And then here you can see this looks like it's going through a spark out where there's very little, if any, sparks remaining here. So that's about it for day 1. A little bit of cleanup time, and then we'll move on to the next part of this project.
The first set of grinding that I've done so far, I've done on the surface grinder, and I've been using coolant. And although it does keep the dust down and the sparks down, I still get this bit of fog kind of in the garage. I've been wearing a mask to make sure that I'm not breathing all that stuff in. But today we're going to try something a little bit different. Got the garage door open. I have, and we're going to try it grinding it dry. I've read that you can grind with flood coolant, with mist coolant, or you can grind it dry as long as you keep track of the temperature and you're not letting your parts, kind of overheat. So we're going to give that a shot, and we're going to start with the movable jaw. We'll get this guy on the surface grinder and see how it works. First thing we're going to do here, it's important that the flat surface that this slides on is perpendicular to the face of the jaws, so that when the jaws are up against your work, it holds things as square as possible. And so what I'm doing here, just a quick inspection, this side has got a pretty rough, I can feel the rust has kind of raised that surface a little bit, whereas this side is pretty good. And so I'm going to, when I put it on the surface grinder, I'm going to use that side first. I just hit it here with these hobby grade tool room stones, just to see if there's any high spots. There's a couple of little ticks that I heard that kind of take off any of those high spots. Might be able to see that a little bit. And then, here on this side, this is going to get full surface grinder treatment, so no sense me using the stone to try to rub down that rust. So we will leave well enough alone with that. But let's bring this over to the surface grinder and clean that up. So it is a little darker over here. Right now my garage door is up, which is over my head, which is covering up most of my LED lighting. So I'll do my best to let you see what's happening here. Just setting this up real quickly, consistent with how I did the other sides, just using my 1, 2, 3 blocks as a guide to keep it parallel. And then it might be overkill, but we'll just leave one of these 1, 2, 3 blocks in the back to offer some stability, so everything's nice and tight in there. Okay, let's get the rotary phase converter powered up. We'll get the surface grinder powered up, and we'll do a dry cut and see how it looks.
So far with my experience using the surface grinder, that first touch off where you're rolling the wheel down, usually there's a crank at the top of the machine. That's so, you turn it down and you think that you're there and you're not quite there. So I'm always very careful about that. But the first pass, when I'm using the surface grinder, I generally do it by hand so that I can make sure that I've identified all the high spots that are on the material, because the last thing I would want is for the machine to, be set at a certain depth, but then be driven, forcefully into a high spot, on the work. As you saw there, that first pass at 1/1000ths, clearly showed that there's some irregularities, happening here due to that rust. So here we go again, taking another look at that, and you can see that variability that rust has caused, really eaten away at the material. Getting near the end now on this side, I've actually lost track of how many thousandths down this is, but I'm getting full contact now across the part. So we're nearing the end where we'll be taking a much shallower cut. Oh, what's going on outside? Oh, the turkeys. The turkeys did not like the sound of the surface grinder. I could hear them over the sound of the surface grinder. I could hear them in my ear. Okay, now here we're going to kind of blast through that last section on this part. Not bad.
So herein lies the question. Which surface finish is better? So this is the dry cut. And this is the wet cut. And although it's imperceivable, you can't feel it. You can see some rippling going on there. So to me, the dry cut looks a lot better than the sides that I had done with the mist coolant. Yeah, it looks to me like dry is better for this cast iron piece.
Let me interrupt and redo the audio on that video clip. With the benefit of 2 more days in the shop working the surface grinder, what I came to realize was even though I liked the dry cut that I had done that day compared to the flood coolant side, which we're looking at now, I wasn't able to repeat those results in what I thought were under the same conditions on on the top surface of this jaw. So what I've learned is that I need more experience and more training to really understand how to surface grind consistently. It's a challenge, and I do enjoy it. And we'll see if we can get better as we go.
Okay, so I've gone back and dry ground the base to see if I could, get any better surface finish. And, this is as smooth as can be, but you can definitely see those ripples in there. I haven't checked to see if that wheel's balanced. Probably something I should do. Just looking at it, I don't know if that tells you that maybe it's out of balance. So I have run it wet at one point, although today we ran it for about 7 or 8 minutes dry just to make sure that it had no more liquid in it. But, I don't know. This is super smooth, but it does have that kind of ripple look in it. Looks like a little bit like a trout.
At this point in the day, my microphone battery had died. So there's 0 audio that accompanies this video. So let me walk you through what we're doing here. At the time, my intention was to mount the fixed jaw and the movable jaw together so that as I ground them flat, they would be paired nicely on the vise. And so using some threaded rods here, I threaded straight through the fixed jaw into the movable jaw in order to hold those two together. And then I'll go underneath the vise and attach the fixed jaw down to the main base. I've seen it done other ways where the vise was assembled and then brought as an assembled unit with the, fully assembled with the shaft in it and the bearings and everything, ready and fully operational. At that point, bringing it over to the surface grinder to grind these surfaces flat. And I thought, I don't know that I want to do that because I don't want to introduce grinding dust into my, newly rebuilt vise. However, I have learned that there is a bit of an assembly trick that you need to do around how you assemble the fixed jaw in relation to the torque that you put into these 2 bolts that hold it here in the bottom, as well as the torque on the lead screw needs to be, cranked in. And so for final assembly, you actually want the movable jaw tight up against a parallel that's in between itself and the fixed jaw, and then you come back underneath and you crank these up to about 150 foot-pounds. So I'm not sure if I'm going to need to go back and regrind the tops of these surfaces again. We'll have to see when I go through the measurement part of this process. So for right now, I just want to make sure that these two are flat together, and this is the approach that I took. We'll see how it goes. This part of the project I've really been looking forward to. I can't wait to get these, the movable jaw and the fixed jaw underneath the surface grinder to grind out that pitting and really see that nice flat metal come out from underneath. I'm curious as to how deep I'll have to go. I'm guessing it could be 25 to 30 thousandths worth of grinding to bring that back to flat and remove all that pitting, but we'll see. But here we go. I'm real excited about this part. Surface grinder work is it's very enjoyable. You can definitely get in the zone as a user of the machine. It's seeing the results from stage to stage, to me, is kind of the coolest part. Trying to boil all that down into a video that's actually entertaining and helpful to see, that's difficult, especially without the normal background noise of the machines running, so you can kind of get a sense. So I'll give you a little bit of a voiceover as we go here, and hopefully it's still enjoyable and you learn a little something. Clearly the rust on this had done its damage, really eaten away the material. The left-hand side of both of these parts really took the worst of the wear. One thing to point out, right in the middle of this piece of material going from left to right, you can see a darker section. That's really where the blade and the material, became very hot. I was probably taking too deep of a cut, as I was going. And it was in that process where I wasn't getting the same type of results that I had received from dry cutting previously. So I decided to transfer over to doing a flood or a mist coolant. It very well could have been the type of wheel that I'm using as well. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of variables to keep in mind, and I was using an aluminum oxide wheel. Okay, so taking down 9 thou, you can see we still have a lot of work to do in this corner. And you can see I'm still working on getting the right feed rate down on that. I'm taking about 1/1000th off per cut, but depending on the speed of how fast you're going, it can all impact what your surface finish ends up looking like. So jumping ahead here now to 15 thou, you can see I've cleaned up a bunch of it, but there's still more work to be done. Getting closer to the end now. There's just a few spots left. And then here we are. At this point, I'm calling it done. There's a couple of small little tick marks where I feel like that rust pitting must go down. It must go down another 5 or 10 thousandths. I don't know. I don't know if you can see it here in the video in the top left-hand corner. There's just some little pits there that just wouldn't come out after grinding and grinding and grinding. So I gave up and let them win that one. It'll give the vise some character. After all that grinding, we'll get the vise outside, hose it down, get all of that metal fragments, metal dust off of there, and then bring it back inside and quickly clean it off, dry it off, and get some WD-40 on it so it doesn't rust.
Okay, so I just got back in from giving this thing a bath to get all of that grinding dust off there. And it came out pretty well. Again, my grinding wheel might need to be balanced. I mean, probably definitely needs to be balanced. I mean, it feels totally smooth, but you can see, you've got some ripples in there. As I worked on yesterday or earlier in this video, I did the sides dry, thinking that might, make a difference, and it didn't really. So I think I need more practice on the surface grinder to improve my surface finish. But I will share. So this package just showed up, and in it we have a Scotch-Brite wheel, which I'll be trying out. This is a Scotch-Brite finishing wheel and deburring wheel. So this is a new purchase, obviously, for the shop, and we're going to see what that can do to help with some of this finish, and we'll also use it on some of the sharp edges just to see how that works. They are pricey. This guy was about $100, but we'll see what kind of results it gives us. All right, so right now we're going to strip this down and get some WD-40 on it so we prevent any rust from its bath. Yeah, that looks great. This thing is starting to look like a new vise again. Okay, that'll hold it over until I can get this guy totally dried off and cleaned up. Being such a fine finish, it probably wouldn't rust that quickly anyway, but after all this, better safe than sorry. Okay, good. Let's see what's next.
The lead screw was next. The lead screw had also a fair bit of pitting on it. Took a little bit of force to unscrew it from the angle lock portion of the vise, but otherwise in decent shape. It took me a minute here to get the tailstock aligned so that I was making sure that, not to create a taper in this shaft. I just wanted to skim it to get that rust off. So I dialed it in based on that round bearing surface there on the left and was able to get pretty close. Still have some more rust, a little bit more work to do. I really didn't like that carbide tip that I had. I changed over to this 60-degree thread cutting bit, and it really did a much cleaner job. Again, one of the things you just learn is when's it the right bit, when is that bit gone bad or is dull. But at the end of that, I was pretty happy with that surface finish the way it came out. But my goal on this vise is really to make it a bit of a jewel. So I thought I'd take some time here and polish it up. And then clean that grit off of your ways after you've done using the emery cloth. One part on here I'm not happy with. Again, I think the shaft came out great. The threads are all in good condition. But the 3/4 inch hex head here on the end, not much I can do about that. Don't really like the finish on that part, but I think I might have to live with it. So here we are at the end of part 2 of the Vise Restoration project. I do appreciate comments. Thank you so much for subscribing to my channel. It means a lot to me that people want to see more content. And we'll definitely have part 3 of the Vise Restoration coming out soon. I've made some really good progress, and I do hope to surprise you. It might be a little different than what you think it'll be, but tune in for episode 3 to find out. Thank you, and have a great day.